Hi, Lee. Welcome to our show.
Hello, Savannah. Welcome to our show.
So grateful to be here.
Yes, indeed.
In these cozy chairs.
Very cozy.
That was smart. You got rid of the pillows. I'm feeling very nestled in at the moment.
You can just toss those if you
Yeah,
need
I
to.
might toss them in a minute if it doesn't work out for me. Lee, tell me, what are the vibes at the moment? What are you bringing in?
The vibes at the moment. I am doing okay. Life is full at the moment with moving parents. And so that means a lot is stirred up, and as far as needing to attend to things. And so just a lot of stuff.
Wait, where are they moving?
They're moving into assisted living.
That's right.
Yes.
This is a big move.
A big move, yes. So we're grateful that they decided to make this move.
Yeah.
But, of course, it means helping them do all that goes along with the move. So that is occupying a lot of my mental energy at the moment.
How long had they been in their current home?
20 years this year. 20 years.
It's a lot of stuff.
Fortunately, the home that I grew up in, that they lived in for probably 30 years or more, they moved from 20 years ago. So it's not nearly as much as it could have been if they had from that other move.
Like all of your stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Right.
That would have been a lot.
So, how about you? What are you bringing in today?
Like I was just saying to you, I got finished with a co-write literally 5 minutes before I got here. I feel like I finished, had 5 minutes to breathe, and then drove here. But the write was great. Rachel Lampa, who is the artist that I was working with, is just a treasure in a field. And it's so fun to be with people who are so talented.
Yeah.
She actually, we were talking about it. She had a song on the album, A Walk to Remember, the Walk to Remember soundtrack. Do you know that movie by any chance?
No, I don't think I do.
Okay, it was a really, really big classic for people my age with Mandy Moore, where she falls in love with someone in high school and she has cancer and then she dies.
Huh. Intense.
But Rachel had a song on that soundtrack and I was like, that's iconic. It was a dark movie for us to be watching, but we were into it. Yeah. She died, right? Yes, I got confirmation from other people around that she
The
did.
character died in the film.
Yeah, Mandy's still alive.
Yes, yeah.
She's kicking.
Yeah.
Yeah, she actually just had a show at the Ryman last year. That was amazing. Okay, Lee, well, since you aren't watching A Walk to Remember, what are you reading or watching, listening to?
Let's see. I don't know. I've been listening to a lot of different playlists on Spotify. On TV, we're watching a Harlan Coben
Runaway
adaptation. Is it the one that's new? Mm-hmm. I think that's the name. Yes.
With the runaway daughter?
Yes. Yeah.
How do you feel about it?
I think I give it a B plus.
Mm-hmm.
B plus. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you've already watched it, I take it?
No, I watched one episode and I was like, this isn't for me.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting enough to get us through episode 3 so far, I think.
Nice. Yeah. For some reason, it didn't grip me, and I don't know why, because it's so my type of show.
Yeah. What are you watching?
The main guy is amazing. Okay, I finished Stranger Things.
Yes.
I finished a book called We Survived the Night by Julian Brave Noisecat. Have you heard of that?
No.
It's a story. Do you know of the First Nations people in Canada? Do you remember how that news story came out a couple of years ago of all of the dead bodies that they found underneath that Catholic school that had been around for 100 years? Uh-huh. Okay, well, this author, his great-grandmother went to that school, and he is a First Nations person. So it's basically his family's whole story and going down to him, which is pretty amazing.
Fascinating.
Yeah, it was a really good... It's called We Survived the Night because in their Indigenous language, instead of good morning, the word that they say is we survived the night. Which I think is really beautiful. Yeah, so I just finished that. Yeah. And then I'm starting something called Against the Machine. Actually, totally your brand.
Yeah, is it kind of...
Techno-capitalism.
Yeah. Oh, good. Yeah, I'm sure I would like that.
So I'm getting into some
dark
stuff.
Speaking of techno-capitalism or critiques thereof, I'm getting to interview Kim Stanley Robinson, who I probably have mentioned a few times.
Yes, you have.
And so I just finished, or I'm almost done, rereading his 2020 book called The Ministry for the Future. And so it's great. He's just so brilliant. and
Are
fascinating.
How are you preparing for that kind of interview?
I'm rereading that book, and I have already just more questions than I can possibly get to.
Okay,
But
nice.
we'll do background stuff and big picture of his life and work, and then I'm basically going to be conversing out of Ministry for the Future with him. So
Nice.
I'm excited about it. A little intimidated because he seems so smart, and I think I haven't watched or listened. I often don't listen to other people's interviews with people because I want my conversation not to be playing off of somebody else's conversation, but for me to have a conversation with him. But that also means that I don't even know what the sound of his voice is like, so I may before then, but at this point I don't have the slightest idea what his voice sounds like.
That's thrilling.
But that's oftentimes a lot of fun just to go into it like that. And it's a real adventure of meeting somebody, for the first time like that.
I feel like that is a good practice in general, probably.
Yeah. I feel like it's worked for me so far. So.
Yeah. And go in probably believing the best and hoping for the best out of anyone, even if other people maybe had a difficult time interviewing them.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so exciting. I can't wait to hear it.
Looking forward to it.
All right. Well, let's start the show.
Let's do it.
Welcome to the Subtext, where we go beneath the headlines and beyond the obvious. I'm Savannah Locke.
And I'm Lee C. Camp.
Hey, if you like what we're doing and want to help us get the show in front of more people, do us a favor by following and rating us wherever you listen. Leave a review, give us 5 stars, hype us up. And if you want to watch full episodes, you can find that on YouTube and Spotify. You can follow the show at The Subtext Show, me at Savannah_Locke, and Lee at Lee C. Camp. And if you have any questions or suggestions for the show, just DM us on Instagram at The Subtext Show. And that's on that. Okay, Lee. Today is actually kind of dark.
I'll say.
So get ready. From A Walk to Remember to this. There's actually a song on the Walk to Remember soundtrack that I think you'd get into by this band called Switchfoot.
I know of Switchfoot.
John Foreman wrote this beautiful song that's in it that I think you would get into. But that being said, I was on Threads, which is like Instagram's version of Twitter. And I was scrolling the other day and I saw these 3 very intense threads in a row. I don't know if we call them threads or just posts or whatever, but I wanted to read them to you. The first post was viral and it said, hey, so I don't want to sound crazy or anything, but I'm 99% sure most of us are going to die in a nuclear holocaust. Okay, great. The next one was a response to that initial post and says, genuinely have had this fear my whole life, none more so than the past 10 years or so. I live in utter spitting spite of doom. Then the third post was also viral and said, quote, no, seriously, go fill your gas tank. And each of them had hundreds of responses of doomsday prophecies. And I thought to myself, this is not good for my nervous system. I felt my heart start racing all from reading these in a row. And when I was reading some of these responses, someone said, if you're not terrified, you're not paying attention. And in my mind,
you thought that should be our conversation. Well,
that's a bold claim.
Allow me to be blunt.
Yes, please.
I think that the original post and that kind of, if you're not paying attention, if you're not terrified, you're not paying attention. I think it's childish and immature and unhelpful and self-indulgent, especially self-indulgent. So let me say 2 things in this regard. Mm-hmm. And I'll welcome people to push back at me about my take on that. But let me say 2 things. One, I've known this for a long time, but a few years ago I was reading Bill Bryson's book. It's like his short history of everything or something like that. And one of the things that became very clear in reading that book was it's like human life is on this razor thin edge all the time already, everywhere. Mm-hmm. And the fact that we are alive right now and the fact that we're sitting here talking to each other, all of the odds of any of that are minuscule. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of things that, in fact, could kill us at any moment, right? I mean, we could get hit by a meteorite. The super volcano underneath Yellowstone Park could blow up and take out most of the western part of the United States. And a few years ago, like the whole land out there apparently was like raised 4 or 5 feet for just, there's a huge volcano out there. A bacterial infection that overcomes any antibiotic that we have, a viral pandemic because we don't take vaccines seriously. Yes, a nuclear holocaust, on and on and on. Yes, absolutely. There are all sorts of things that could kill us at any moment. And so, but I think if you don't first take a look at the broader context, that guy said he's 99% sure we're going to die in a nuclear holocaust. Well, look, I'm 100% sure about something, and that is the fact that apart from the Lord coming and the kingdom of God coming, we are all dying, and it won't be very long until we're all dead, right? And so the kind of deal then is to ask, what does it mean to be a realistic human being who's mature enough to deal with the fact that, yeah, we're all going to die. And we all may die very difficult deaths. That is what it means to live. And so rather than this sort of thinking of anger as a credential for being taken seriously in the world, why not just say, yep, that's the nature of life. So what does it mean to grow up and to take death seriously and to live well? And, especially in the Middle Ages, they had these manuals that would have, at least one of my friends who's a professor in English Lit tells me, they had these manuals where the primary point of these manuals was to teach you to live such that you were preparing yourself to die well. And so that's a very different kind of thing. In the Western world, we're so terrified of talking about death. We're not having funerals anymore. Years ago, my wife told me, she told me that a coworker came in, and this coworker had been to a funeral in our church context. And she said, I have PTSD from this funeral. And she said, what are you talking about? And she said, they threw dirt on the casket, and I just am overwhelmed with discomfort. And I'm thinking, one, have you never been to a funeral? And two, do you not know what happens to somebody when they die, right? And so we're so far away from death, and I think this is a fascinating call to, okay, let's grow up a little bit and take death more seriously. Now, that's maybe the harshest I've been on any of these episodes, so feel free to push back.
I don't know if I would say harsh, confronting for sure. I think that it's not what I was expecting you to say. So are you saying that for you, these takes show a lack of acceptance of reality that we're going to die no matter what? Like that some of these takes don't go far enough with their confrontation
Okay,
of
great
death?
Great question. No. I guess what I'm saying is twofold. One, it's as if fear has become a credential for you getting to say something in public.
The direction I thought you were initially going to go in. Yes, we love. Okay.
And it's like, give me a break,
yes.
Right? And two, it's almost, I want to say very clearly that unprocessed emotion is not necessarily insight nor wisdom. Right. And there is a place to process raw emotion, and I would say, pity upon those of us who don't have friends or relationships in which they can process raw emotion. We all need to do it. But stop doing it in public. Right. Don't do it in public. There are things you ought not do in public. Have a little modesty. Yeah. And this is a sort of lack of modesty. Yeah. Process your emotion, if it's raw, in places that are appropriate to do it. But throwing all this stuff out upon the public is not helpful.
It's litter. It's emotional litter.
Yeah. That's a good phrase, emotional litter.
Thank you.
I like that.
I'll take it.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So many things that you have here. First, the confrontation of death piece, which I actually love. That perspective gave me a lot of peace from the Bill Bryson book. The reality that there are so many existential threats. Yeah. And just because some of them are coming into our vision more clearly at the moment doesn't make them any more or less pertinent necessarily. Yeah. Like there are other ones that are still in existence.
I have a point to argue with both of us about that, but go ahead.
No. Argue with that. Let's just go one point at a time.
I mean, I would say that I don't want to communicate by saying these things that, well, we're all going to die, so who gives a crap about any of these social ills? Yeah, that's not the point at all, right? Yeah, it's that there are some people that could do some stuff about the idiocy of the threat of nuclear warfare.
Yes.
nuclear warfare and all that we have poured into it is a horror and it is immoral to no end. And there are some people who ought to do something about it, who have the capacity to do something about it. And no one seems to have the imagination or the political will or the political community to make something possible. Except now we're imagining that doing more nuclear tests somehow will make us safer and more powerful in the world. Give me a break on that, right? So there are things that we ought to be working on, and the people who can work on them should work on them. But to go around ruminating upon things I have zero control over doesn't really do any of us any good, I don't think.
Agree. Have I told you my nuclear Holocaust story?
No.
Or no? Okay. A couple of years ago when Biden was president, he did this offhanded comment at some sort of state dinner that talked about how maybe we were closer to like a nuclear Holocaust than we realize. Just probably naming reality, but also probably not wise for the president to say. Okay. So when I read that in the news, it just lodged in my brain. And it was one of those things that occasionally happens to me where I get hyperfixated on things. And I thought, what would happen if there was a nuclear Holocaust? Like, what would go down? What would it look like? Who would survive? What about in my state? Because in Tennessee, we have... So I start going down my little research hole. And by the next day, I was laying in a hammock because I knew I needed to get outside because I knew my brain was not well. But I was laying in a hammock watching simulations of what would happen in a nuclear Holocaust, right? So not a good mental place to be. And I had the wherewithal to say, I don't need to stay here. Like, it's been 12 hours. And I called my husband and I immediately start saying, did you know about all, like, did you know what would go down? And I start to describe how people would die and how quickly it would happen and the residue and who could control it, but et cetera, but doesn't. And as I'm panicking, I mean, I'm weeping in this hammock and Todd is on the phone with me and he's just so calm. And I was like mad, thinking, this is a big deal. Why aren't you freaking out? And I tell him, why aren't you anxious about this? He had the best response. I actually ended up writing a whole song about this. He had the best response that said, well, because I can't control nuclear weapons and God really loves the world. And when he said it, I just thought to myself, okay, there are so many things in my control. This is not one of them, genuinely. Like, I don't have control over the nuclear codes. I don't know who does, but I don't. And there's also, for me, from my faith, a recognition of like, God really loves the world. And there's like a peace that can come from that. And I think that for me, when I was reading some of these posts, which goes to your like emotional hygiene commentary, which is that like when we output into the world without processing it with real people, I think sometimes we can lose sight of the reality of what's in our control and what's not. And then also whether or not there is like some sort of divine force or love behind the world.
Yeah. I mean, that reminds me of, maybe there's something about being in your 20s and 30s that maybe that's, I don't know if that's a natural part of being in your 20s or 30s, but for me it was. I mean, my wife and I went to Nairobi, Kenya, and worked in Nairobi for half a year before we had kids. And that opened our eyes to the great depth of pain in the world, of what poverty looked like, real poverty, depths of poverty looks like, and the injustice of it all, and the way the powerful and the wealthy take advantage and all of that stuff. So I came back from that just undone. And then I go to do 5 years of graduate school, which is the classic, consciousness raising about the injustices of the world. And so I don't think I really thought about, I remember one day I'd taken the train from South Bend to Chicago because I was doing some research at the University of Chicago, one of the divinity school houses there. And then I took the train back, and I had stopped in the bookstore, and I had picked up Elie Wiesel's little book, Night. And it's a very short book, but I read 30 or 40 pages of it on the train ride back. And I was so overcome by it, I just set it aside for about a year. And then I thought, I need to finish that book. And so I assigned it for a class that I was teaching at Notre Dame so that I would finish the book.
Nice.
And so I went, and there's 2 beautiful lakes on the Notre Dame campus. And so I went for a couple of hours and just walked around those lakes and read that book. And then I sat on a park bench and I just sobbed and I wept. And during those years, I exposed myself to a lot of those stories over and over and over again. And I don't think I ever really thought much about what that did to me until some years later. I was sitting in therapy, and after I had been with this therapist for a good long while, he said something like, I've been trying to figure out what has so traumatized you. And he said, I think it may be books. And it was like, oh, that may be right. And because I took in so much of the grief of the world, and I did not know what to do with it.
Lee.
And so I learned at that point, a lot of things. And I learned that one has to pay attention to our emotional health, and you have to pay attention to the fact of what you can and cannot control. Mm-hmm. And you may not be doing anybody any good if you just obsess about the injustices and harms of the world mm-hmm. and the way that everything can go to. But, it's like that's the way the world is. Mm-hmm. And so then the question becomes, okay, how do I show up to the world and be constructive and helpful mm-hmm. to some given social condition around me, mm-hmm. as opposed to saying, well, if you're not terrified, you're not paying attention. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I don't find it helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. The piece that you're talking about, the phrase that my therapist has used with that is narrative buffer. Like I don't have a narrative buffer when I'm reading things or watching things, which makes it feel very real to me. And I think some people can watch it with some more detachment or objectivity, but for me, it's never been the case. So I have to be really conscious of what I watch on social media and stuff, which is why even on socials, from a practical standpoint, like the autoplay piece, do you know what I'm talking about? Yeah. Like when you go, that the videos automatically play. Right. So if there's ever anything going on, I just kind of try to stay off for that reason. But that reminds me of that with the night book. Yeah. Which also goes to with, if you're not terrified, you're not paying attention, also uses fear as the metric for whether or not someone is really paying attention in the world, which I categorically reject. Yeah. I don't think that that's the only response to being well learned in the world. Right. So what are some alternative responses that you have found that have been helpful, that keep your feet on the ground and keep your heart active and engaged, but do not lead to utter terror of you or me laying in my hammock freaking out? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that, I think these days, the way I kind of think about it is that, there are certain things that I want to be at least somewhat aware of, mm-hmm. Because it means just showing up as a citizen and a neighbor to know some of the things that are going on. Mm-hmm. But even with that, I mean, I was always struck years ago by hearing, I either heard a friend tell me, colleague tell me, or read, where Thomas Merton said something like, if it's real news, it will still be news 6 months from now. Mm. And I thought, well, that's helpful. Mm-hmm. And in my early 30s, I read this book by a Quaker named Thomas Kelly, mm-hmm. a book called Testament of Devotion. Do you know this book? Mm-mm. It's a very small, like 5 essays, I think it is. Beautiful little book, Testament of Devotion. And one of the things that I recollect he says in there, he's writing this in the 1930s. I think it's published in 1941. And he says, he's talking about mass media. Mm. And he says, the human mind and soul are not created to handle the onslaught of mass media. Mm. And this is in the 1930s.
Insane, yeah.
Right, so 90 years ago. And so I've just tried to remind myself through the years of we're not wired, mm-hmm. Whether it's by evolution or whether or not you believe we were created exactly as we are, mm-hmm. we're not wired for that. Mm-hmm. And so then I think that invites us to make conscious, intentional decisions about what we will take in and why. And so I've tried to think more carefully about, why do I take this in? What am I going to do with it? How can this be helpful? How do I show up in this way and try to make a contribution to the world, rather than indulging my fear and indulging my anxiety and making myself more of a mess, rather than somebody that can show up and be helpful?
Yeah, because it sounds so good and righteous to be like, I want to be aware. And I think that there's something so good about that. And I don't know when it shifts into that self-indulgence other than I know how it feels and it feels bad. Do you know what I don't know, like if someone asks me now, how do you know if you're doing one or the other? I'm not sure what the line is other than I know that what we're doing now isn't working well.
Yeah.
I don't see the benefit to I think you used the word onslaught of information and images that we're constantly being faced and being told that we have to care about with equal value at all times.
Yeah. Yeah.
How are we supposed to handle that in our brains?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I do think that there's, the old line from Peter Marin, which I may have used on our conversations before, who was a partner with Dorothy Day in the Catholic Worker Movement. He used to say something like, decide what social ill you want to make a difference in and go prepare yourself and then go do it. Right. So at best, we can make a contribution to one or two social ills. So maybe we say, what's my contribution here?
Yeah. Which Sharon McMahon from No Small Endeavor from your show that you did this year, that's what she says. She says, pick one thing and focus on it.
Yeah.
Like you just focus. If you care about education, focus on education. If you care about gun violence, focus on gun violence, the environment, whatever it is. Because otherwise I do think it gets too overwhelming.
Yeah.
I read through this study from the University of Glasgow. The professor's name is Andrew Hoskins. He's a social sciences professor. And he talked about media and compassion after digital war, why digital media haven't transformed responses to human suffering. So basically, he studied how there were hundreds and thousands of images from the Syrian war that were posted all over the news, and they were seen by more people than anyone ever saw of like World War I, for example, at the time. So he was talking about how if awareness was the barrier for people between like compassion and action,
or lack of awareness.
Or a lack of awareness. Yes. Oh, yeah. How a lack of awareness was the issue. Then surely these thousands of images being posted throughout social media and on the news would have solved that problem, because now people would be able to see the suffering firsthand as it was occurring. But what he ended up finding throughout his research is that it caused instead a lack of action because of what he calls participatory outrage. So participatory outrage is when you share in the horror, revulsion, or compassion through retweeting, liking, or commenting on an image on the suffering of another person, in this case in the Syrian war, but that it actually blunts the rage. So the work of making a stand is seen as done once you've done the tweeting or the liking or the reposting or whatever. So what he saw is that through the digital forum of thousands of images being posted and reshared and liked, it actually led to less real world action. Which feels relevant to this because it seems like now if we see these images, like there have been even this week, like thousands of videos and images posted of real horrors happening in the world right now, that if we like or comment, it feels like we're doing something.
Right.
And in reality, that's not real action. I'm not saying that there isn't anything good that can happen from that, but that's not real action and real justice and reform work. And so it's actually having the adverse response. Yeah. Have you ever come across anything like that? Or
yes. One, I'll just say from my own experience, I don't know if I had read some stuff like that or just realized what it was doing to myself, but because I'm hypersensitive to seeing someone, myself or other people, shamed. And so I have, I think that makes me conscious of the ways in which anger and shaming in social media, I just don't like to get close to that. And even if it's around something that also makes me angry, And so, but I started realizing the way in which I think precisely what he's saying is as if you like something or you say something that makes you angry or you comment in certain ways, there's a way in which that is, like he says, a participatory anger, and then you think you've done something, but you haven't done anything, which reminds me of Musa Al-Gharbi. Have we ever talked about him before? So Musa has this great book called We Have Never Been Woke. And what he basically argues is that academics And a lot of social activists make the social conditions, they do not help social conditions because they talk about them in such a way as to act as if mere words change the material conditions of people who supposedly we're caring about. And so he keeps insisting, you've got to pay attention to the material facts and the material needs.
Yep.
And so we interviewed him for No Small Endeavor, and then I had dinner with him sometime after that, and I think that rings in my head all the time. It's like, okay, fine. If you want to comment on social media, fine. But have you changed the material conditions for anybody? And, 99% of the time I would guess, no, I haven't, right? And so I keep pushing myself. Okay, why don't you try to make a material difference in somebody's life rather than feeling all justified because you said something on social media?
And ironically, I have found when I do make a material difference, when I do show up physically in person making a change, then I am filled with more hope.
Yeah.
That's the irony, is the people who are really doing activism work, a lot of the times have a lot of joy that keeps them going. The church that I go to is an extremely high activist church. And so it's filled with a lot of old people too, who have been doing it for 50 years now. And it's through them that I've actually been doing stuff. I don't know. I've talked about stuff for a really long time. And then now they're like, okay, yeah, but come do the thing. Show up at the protest, give money to X, Y, and Z. And so being with them has helped me see how people can do this for the long run.
Yeah.
Because for me, I remember 3 or 4 years ago, I was walking around Radnor with one of my best friends, and I had just had my 30th birthday. And I looked at my friend and I said, I don't even know if I can do this for another 30 years. I'm so tired and overwhelmed. And being around all of these older people who have been doing it for decades and have joy and hope because their feet are on the ground, that shows me the pathway towards sustainable action.
Yeah, that's lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Little angels.
Yeah.
One more thing I wanted to mention from Andrew Hoskins' work is that he did some work on attention studies. So he said that attention begins to get dispersed at 2 objects. So if you have just 2 things in front of you, the attention has a hard time. Huh. You can't focus as hard and draw as much information from 2 things you're looking at as from 1. So what about 55,000? 55,000 is the number of images he estimated came from the Syrian war. It breaks our systems. Our simple system of senses and feelings can't handle it. And I thought about that when it relates to socials, or even just if you don't, not even on socials, just news alerts.
Yeah.
How are our brains able to handle attention on multiple things? Forget our own lives.
Yeah. Yeah, that's super helpful. I mean, that reminds me of the conversation we had recently on No Small Endeavor with Munther Isaac. And
that was a really good interview.
Yeah, his conversation about, so he's, for those of you who don't know him, he is a Palestinian Christian Lutheran pastor, lives in the West Bank, works in the West Bank, and he was talking about, and he's written up on the war in Gaza, and he was talking about how when the war started and all of his congregants and he were inundated with all of these images, and getting text messages from people who had these horrible things happen to their family, or was happening in their streets. And he said at some point he had to make a decision not to continue to take in all those images because he knew that was, I forget how he said it, but I heard him basically saying, I can take in too many of those and it hardens me and it eviscerates my capacity for compassion. And, so similar parallel with that research you were just citing. And that he didn't want his humanity to be taken away by being exposed to image after image after image. And so he had to start choosing when he was going to let those images in. So I was struck by that wisdom, it seems to me.
Yeah, that whole podcast was full of a lot of wisdom. That interview was really beautiful. I would definitely recommend that people go listen to it. So I'd love to talk, to close by talking about alternative practices. In episode 10 of the show, we talked, which actually got a lot of feedback. That was the one where we talked about slavery, remember? It was a lot that we talked about. In that episode, we talked about how the Bible doesn't adequately address every modern issue of our time, this feels like such a great example of one where this wasn't on any of the biblical authors' radar. That there would one day be a time where in our pockets would be all the information of all the world, all that there ever was. And so I would love to talk about how do we think about this through the lens of faith, through the lens of just compassion and good humanity, and what are some practices that you have that have been helpful for this?
Well, I think that there's a way in which maybe there are perhaps some, obviously the Scripture doesn't talk any about social media and the particular nature of distraction that we deal with today. But it does talk a lot about distraction, and it does talk a lot about anxiety. And so, and a lot of that wisdom has a lot to do with focus upon the present as opposed to the future. You know, do not say, we shall go into such and such a town and do business and buy and sell there, but say, if the Lord wills, then we shall, says the book of James. Or, you know, Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount, don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow has enough worries of its own. Attend to today. And so I think those are very helpful practices.
It's what version did you grow up on? That sounds very King James to me, and I'm trying, but it wouldn't be King James with Church of Christ.
I did grow up on King James.
It is King James. Yeah. Nice. Continue. Sorry. It's just every time you quote the Bible, I'm always like seeking for the version, but then you stay away from the shall and the thous.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do not use, for the record, I do not use King James Version
today
any longer.
You have a blend now.
Yeah,
you have a blend.
But yeah, the stuff that's memorized is in the King James.
Yes, beautiful.
But often I'm kind of converting it on the fly. I
love it.
But anyway, to focus upon today and the moment and what you can do now, right? Rather than getting caught up off in the future. Another thing that I would say that I think is really important in all this conversation that we've kind of alluded to is I don't think either one of us want to suggest we should over spiritualize it and spiritualize away legitimate social concerns.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Yeah. No.
Yeah. And so the idea is not to say, oh, you don't have to worry about this because we're going to go to heaven when we die.
Yep.
Not at all.
The opposite. Right? Yes. No.
But instead, it's how do you deal with the realities of the world and seek to make a contribution of whatever your calling is in the world to do that. And then I think also the focus upon humility and our finitude is really important. You know, neither one of us are all that, you know, and we've got a little bit of gifts and a little bit of energy and a little bit of lifespan, and life is but a vapor and then passes. And so what are you going to do with it, right? And do what you can. So I think all of those things are really important to me. And it also makes me remember years ago when another war had broken out. And I was especially distraught about this particular one because it seemed on false pretenses. And I was in that kind of space, and I was in my early 30s. And I was biking in Nashville and biking out to Radnor Lake. And I was going through the Creve Hall neighborhood, and I came upon a weeping willow tree. And it was kind of a mystical moment for me because I don't know, the what that experience kind of said to me was, you know, as if the voice of God was saying, I have wept about the griefs of the world for a long, long time. And I know this is all new and heavy for you, but there's been a lot of people that have grieved, and you are not alone. So do what you can and don't wallow in it, and don't lie down in self-pity in it.
Lee, you made me tear up. Very pastoral. Yeah, I love that. I think it reminds me of Exodus when God speaks to Moses in the burning bush scene, and all I can think of is the Prince of Egypt animated movie. And if you want to go there with me, you can. But when he talks about how he's heard the cry of his people and he's seen their oppression. And I think about this a lot, especially in this present time, even though I know that it's not new, that the entire Hebrew Bible is God really caring about people oppressed by these very oppressive systems. They wouldn't have obviously called them like government systems, but for our modern context, and how God does really care. And to your point that like God grieves with us and grieves with people who are being oppressed, and that there is something grounding about that reality. Like, this feels so new to me, to you when you were in your 30s with the weeping willow tree. And it feels so heavy, but to know that, like, we come from not only a spiritual tradition of people who have cared about this, but also that there's a God that cares about this is really grounding and peaceful to me.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, great conversation.
Yeah, great conversation. Thanks for bringing this to us.
Of course.
Yeah, I'll be interested to hear any pushback.
Especially about your initial rant. It was
the closest I've gotten to a rant.
Well, it's just a little it was a little preachery, and I felt this fire,
I did
like this
get
preacher fire.
I did get a little preachery.
I actually think you said the Lord at one point. And I was like, here we go.
Yeah, there we go.
I love it.